First of all, can you introduce yourself and your role at Ensera?
Hi, Oli. Yes, my name is Michael Halleck, and I am what does it say here? I am a senior director of engineering. I oversee the electronic, the firmware, and the software.
What kinds of emerging technologies are you seeing right now in medical devices?
Rather than give the obvious answer of AI, there are a lot of emerging technologies, and you can kind of group them into a few different categories, but it's really anything that is new and innovative that comes out of areas that may not be medical. You think of AI, which is really data-driven and data analysis systems. There are communication systems that are coming up, and even development tools, operating systems, and the development tools that are used in these. Another interesting area is implied biomarkers, and by that I mean inferring different biomarkers based on reading other things. As an example, these watches that we wear, right? They claim to be able to tell us in the staging of sleep. And if you were to go to a sleep doctor and ask him, he'd say, no, the watch can't do that. But what it's doing is it's implying based on other markers, blood pressure, not blood pressure, but heart rate and blood oxygen and things like that. So these are emerging technologies as well.
How can companies responsibly adopt emerging technologies into a medical device lifecycle?
Sure. So I think the first step is really understanding the risks, and not just from the engineer's viewpoint of can I solve this problem, but from the real risks that could be implied in this. Doing an early risk analysis is very important. Really, again, understanding what that is from the stakeholder standpoint, not just from a technology standpoint. Another area is really in disaster planning. Sometimes we hear this risk versus reward, right? And which is always good to look at, but there's also risk versus disaster, if you will, which is kind of the negative outcome, and really having a good handle on those as well. And kind of the last thing is to really understand that when you're talking about emerging technologies, that things like legal and regulatory can often lag. So as you get started with an emerging technology, you may not have legal protections or regulatory protections in place right away. So it's really important to understand that, because they're coming. And if you don't plan for that, you can be in for some real shocks as well.
How do teams assess whether their organization is ready to support an emerging technology?
Yeah, I think it really starts with understanding the difference between technical competency and system understanding. And again, just because you can do something doesn't mean necessarily you should, or that you understand all the steps that would be required to bring those concepts to reality in the medical space. Having very clear regulatory and clinical understanding is so important as well, because a lot of times in medicine it's not just about what a device or system can do, but it's what you've proven that it can do through those processes. Another one is just really understanding the readiness of the device to go through a regulatory process. Is it really at a point that you can do this? A lot of times we think, hey, I'm doing something brand new in the world and this is a great thing. On the medical side, this is not necessarily a good thing. It can really expand the regulatory burden, and you have to go through completely different processes, whereas if there's something that's already been proven, the path can be a little bit cleaner.
If a company is considering adopting an emerging technology, what questions do they need to ask, and how can Ensera help? And are there any examples of where Ensera has helped?
Absolutely, yeah. I guess one question is, why this technology and why now? Why is this? And really understanding the answers to that. Making sure that you do understand the underlying technology. There's plenty of cautionary tales out there, right, of groups that jumped into some promise of a beautiful technology. Theranos is an obvious example, right, where the technology really wasn't clearly understood at the stakeholder level. So really understanding that. And again, disaster planning. If things go off the rails, if things don't go the way that we thought they might go, do we have plans to address those things? And again, these need to be addressed early. I think probably another important thing is, does the organizational culture have a tolerance for this type of activity. If it's not something that the company has the stomach or awareness to do, trying to force it through an organization can be a disaster. Okay.
Once a company brings in Ensera, what do you do to assist them?
Well, one of the first things we like to do is really try and understand the real state of the product or the technology. Not necessarily what the client believes or even the stakeholders, but really understanding what gaps exist. A lot of times we'll see a client that believes that they're really close to being able to do clinical trial and they're not. Or they'll feel like they're ready to go right into manufacturing. And not understanding some of those gaps is one of the very first things that we like to do. Risk analysis, again, I know I've mentioned that several times, but risk analysis, you just can't talk about it enough. And early risk analysis, as an early part of the design, we like to sit down and really start to, it's Debbie Downer, I get it, but sometimes you got to throw a wet blanket on these things. One of the things we talked about in our group is sometimes you need a pessimist on the team to kind of bring things down, and nobody likes it, but it's really important, and it gives you a better lay of the land, and so that's what we bring into it. The other thing that we bring in at Ensera is full end-to-end, and what that means is we really understand the process all the way from clinical research through product development, through regulatory burden, to design for manufacturing, design for maintainability, design, all the DXF stuff, and then the ability within one organization to take that same design to those next steps, to be able to do small build manufacturing all the way through large build manufacturing, and then finally, of course, sustainment of the product. And really having an awareness of that full product lifestyle from birth to death and beyond is what we bring at Ensera and Ensera Design.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Oli. It was a pleasure.
Perfect.
How'd that go?
Absolutely perfect.